Our next session is Bridging Research and Treatment, a clinical trials panel discussion, and will be moderated by Dr. Jamie Hatcher-Martin from Novartis and Synapticure. Please welcome Dr. Hatcher-Martin up to the stage.
So I guess if we want to have all of our panelists come up. So thank you all for attending today. I know there's lots of questions. We'll actually be able to get to some of these during the next session. But coming off of Martha's fantastic introduction to sort of demystifying research, we really wanted to have a panel of people all across the board to talk about what is clinical research? How do you get involved? Why should you get involved? What things should you think about before you get involved? So we have a wonderful panel of people who are involved in all various aspects. Somebody actually has Huntington's disease. Somebody has had a family member. I'll allow them all to introduce themselves. And we'll talk a little bit about these different options, but also absolutely have questions that we'll be able to answer. So we'll start. I'm not going to stand up here the whole time, but we'll start. If we can maybe just start at the end, and we'll just do introductions, and then we'll go from there.
I was hoping that you were going to go the other way, so I would go, last. But it's fine. It's fine. I appreciate it. No, there's no need for this bell. Hello, everyone. My name is Seth Rotberg. I've been involved in HD for many, many years. As an active community member for close to 16, 17 years. So my mom had Huntington's disease and battled it for about 17 years. She passed away over 9 years ago. I decided I wanted to go through genetic testing, found out I carried the gene, so I am guaranteed to get it. No ifs, ands, or buts, as we all know that here. But I've been an active member, started with volunteering with HDSA, then got involved with HDO, an international nonprofit supporting young people. And then today I work professionally actually at a small biotech company working in the HD space. But, I'm here to talk about, there it is. Time's up, I know. I'm here to talk just about my own personal views. So anything I say is just kind of about my own personal perspectives and views on my involvement in the space, my participation in different research studies, and then also ways to get involved.
My name is E.J. Garner. I'm from Olympia, Washington, and I've been involved with Huntington's since 2006 when my son was diagnosed with Huntington's disease. Prior to that, my ex-husband was diagnosed, but we didn't know about it until well after my son had been diagnosed. So I'd say I married into a family with it. So my son had it, my ex-husband had it. He died when he was 52 in 2002. My son passed away from it in 2015, and my son had passed it on to his son, Matthew, who was 6 when he passed away. He had a very high CAG of 169. I was told that he was diagnosed at the University of Washington at the Center of Excellence, and I was told that his score was the highest. I don't know if we want that moniker, but anyway, that was his CAG. Been involved with Huntington's disease group from starting in Orange County, California, with the HDSA chapter down there, and then moved up to Washington, so now I'm with the Washington State Seattle chapter, and I think I was telling Seth here, I'll be in this until the end, until we can say that there's a treatment that will help our folks, because I've met so many people in this organization, and I know that many, it might not be time that you will be able to take advantage of some of the treatment. So I'll be here for you and everyone in that space.
I'm Becca Ganous. I'm a social worker at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, so I get to work with Dr. Duker, so that's a privilege. I'm also a family member. My father had Huntington's disease, and he was the first person in our family to be diagnosed. So I kind of like multi-roles here. So again, my perspective is probably just like yours, just kind of my own perspective. So.
I'm Susan Conrad. I'm a family member. My dad had HD. He was 76 when he was diagnosed, and I was 46 when I was diagnosed, right about 6 months after him. So we did not know it was in our family at all, and that now we understand that my grandma and her father had it. It makes a lot of sense. But so I've been in 3 research studies at the University of Cincinnati, and I'm just very active and interested in finding a cure because I don't want to be here for the rest of my life either. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
My name's Sandra Kostick. I'm a neurologist from the Ohio State University, and I've been running our HDSA Center of Excellence since 2000, so I've been involved in watching families. I've treated generations of families, and I've also been involved, and I don't want you to get discouraged from this statement, I think at least 20 failed clinical trials. But I want you to know from each trial that didn't actually work, we learned things and we're making progress, and we have a number of things online that are like right now going on that are showing real progress. And the other thing that we've all participated in for years is some of our observational trials, because this is this is a rare disease. A lot of people haven't followed it over time. And participating in our studies to learn more about individuals with HD has been very important to informing how we design our future trials. And I'll do more PR on those studies later.
Hi, and my name is Jamie Hatcher-Martin. I am a movement disorders neurologist. I first caught the bug for HD, so those of you who are not born into the families know that once you're in the family, you stay. So I first got the bug back in 2000, probably about 2001, 2002. I went to an HD camp that was put on by Emory University, and just met families and people living with HD and just fell in love. So I've been involved in clinical research. I've been involved in basic science research. And to Martha's point before, I actually was really interested in access to care, so I got involved in telemedicine quite early. Starting in 2015, I actually started a clinic in 2016 for people living with HD who had difficulty people living with movement disorders who had difficulty getting into clinic. And so I currently, my day job is I actually work for a company called Novartis. It's a pharmaceutical company. And part of what I'm working on is new treatments for people living with neurodegenerative diseases. But I also work with a company called Synapticure that's focused on providing expert movement disorders or subspecialty care for people living with movement disorders and other neurodegenerative diseases, regardless of where they live. So very passionate about all of these things. And very excited to be moderating today's panel, which means I will try to keep my mouth shut, which is difficult for me usually. And I get to let all of these people shine. So we did a poll ahead of time, and a little over a third of the audience, or the people that responded, said that they had participated in a clinical trial. So I thought maybe, Susan, we could start with you and maybe talk a little bit about sort of your experience in a clinical trial and
I've been in 3 research studies under Dr. Duker's care, and I was diagnosed with HD in March of 2016, and I was in a study in April of 2016. So I'm right in that sweet spot of being able to. I have enough stuff, I guess, wrong with me that I qualify, but I also am still, I don't know. I feel like for some reason, I fall into a good category, and I know that's frustrating for a lot of people, either too young or too old, or, I know that's frustrating. So I feel very grateful that I can contribute so much. My first research study lasted for many years. It was one of the studies that Dr. Kostick was talking about that did not have great results and was not approved by the FDA, but we all feel like it. I think a lot of people in the study feel like it had a lot of good results, and I feel like my HD did not get as much worse because I was in that study. The second study I was in, was a early level study, and I got drug-induced lupus from that study. So I was very sick. I was in the hospital for about a month. Half my hair fell out. I was very sick. But I have an amazing support group in Cincinnati. I have an amazing family. I have amazing friends. And I was able to recover from that, and I wanted to still be in research. We're in a research hospital, and I think being able to participate in that, and I think Huntington's is worse than lupus. So I bounced back and decided to be in another research study. I feel like this one's for me. It's cognitive impairment one that Dr. Vance was talking about, and I've been in that one for about 2 years. So I think it's it's ups and downs, just like Huntington's is, and
So we had a great introduction to, there's some various types of trials. Sandra, maybe you can talk, you sort of alluded to this before, maybe some of the different types of trials that are out there.
So first off, though, I'd like to say how impressed I am by you. This is a really brave process. She was on something that I've been on a lot of the trials, and then, okay, it didn't work. But that was effort, coming to the visits, and then to be involved. We really try really hard before running a trial. What could the possible side effects be? And to be quite honest, over the years, I've seen a lot of benefits from trials that I didn't expect, particularly in some Parkinson's disease gene therapy trials I was involved in, that I didn't actually wasn't very confident that they were the right thing to do, but certain things turned out that were unexpected. But we've also had unexpected things. And I'm so impressed by the fact that something which I'm sure was not in the list of most likely consequences of this new intervention we're studying, we're exploring, that you had the courage to say, I'm not done yet, because everything we learned from the observational trial, the interventional trial, and the current trial you're on, is actually moving things forward. So the first time I met her was on a Zoom with all of us as we were coordinating what I was going to say. I said, wow, just impressed by that. But you feel free to cut me off because I'm notorious for telling stories, right? So when my time's up. But I believe what you asked me to do is talk about different kinds of trials. And in a sense, one of the things that we've learned a lot from our trials is probably the easiest trial of participation thing you can do is to participate in a observational trial. So what is an observational trial? Martha alluded to this, but some of the things that differ in HD we couldn't figure out why. So when you get a CAG repeat size of, the average in my clinic is 42 or 43, okay? The first question patients will ask me is, when am I going to have symptoms? And my new social worker hates this common phrase I use, but I say, beats me, okay? What a great Dr. Kostick must be. Why do I say that? Because when then the average age of onset of symptoms for individuals like that with a repeat size in that is 35 to 65, 55, okay? But we also categorize people as earlier onset below that, and that more depends on the repeat size, but not completely. And then a category of people with late onset, who's usually considered individuals above 61. And some of our observational studies have helped us learn the difference between late onset versus earlier onset. But in this beats me thing, the reason I say that is I think you need to appreciate that the way your disease presents, and we've learned this from both observational studies and clinical studies, is not necessarily like your mother presented. Even if you have the same repeat size on your other gene that you got from your father, it will affect how your behavior and your disease progresses. So just, again, as a little story just to see where we're learning things, because sometimes the outliers are important. One of our residents saw a patient in the asked by neurosurgery consult because she was 91. She'd fallen, broken her hip, and got a subdural hematoma. And the surgeons wanted to know why she was having movements on one side and was it affected by the hematoma and should they do surgery? She says, yes, do surgery, take out the hematoma. But her three over 70-year-old sons came and were at the bedside. And we tried to find out, a lot of you will hear there's no family history of HD when you're first diagnosed. And she cried, and they went, well, her younger brother died in a car accident, and there was something funny about him 50 years ago. And someone mentioned the word HD, okay? So then they all wanted to come and get tested. All right, so I said, well, let's test Mom first. I examined her, no behavioral problems. She had bilateral chorea now because I took out the subdural hematoma. I predicted she was going to have something else, and she had a 41 repeat size. She's one of the oldest people who didn't have symptoms until she was, 86. We need to understand why she had such late onset of symptoms, a little gait abnormality at age 86, and then at 89, some chorea. That can give us hints for new ways to treat symptoms and diseases and predict things. And before I answer your, notice I haven't answered your question yet about, you may want to stop me at the end of observational trials, but why they're so important. But observational trials give us a lot of information. And so in a comment on on a study, which is showing some promise now that I was on a meeting for, I'm never early for things. I was early for this one, so I was talking to this prominent scientist about my patient. And what he said is, can we have her blood? And her son said yes. And so she'd mentioned, Nance had mentioned some of the things we've learned from our observational trials. And one of them is there are some of these new genes that we're looking at that may delay the repeat size expanding in the brain. Differences in CAA repeats in the Huntington gene, MS3, FAN1. And so we ran her for all those things. I sent it to the University of British Columbia with her signed release, and we did all the stuff about it. She tested negative for all the things we know so far that delays the onset. So there's still opportunities and still things for us to do. What's really important is the community participating. Years ago, when we were first starting these observational trials, we got NIH funding for a study called PHAROS. We were going to enroll 1,000 people in the country. And NIH funded this, but said, you're going to have a hell of a time recruiting people, because what you're asking is people who have a known family history, who haven't been tested, who don't want to be tested, and will agree to come into our for a visit for assessment of cognitive motor behavioral testing, and the blood test will only go to Rochester, and you will never find out from it if you had it. And they thought we'd have trouble recruiting. The community has been wonderful at this sort of thing. We got 1,000, we were aiming for 1,000. We had 1,001 participants across the country, United States and Canada, because we forgot about the time zone. We said we're just ending on, the 5th of March, and of course the time zone in California was different from the East Coast, and you couldn't tell the people on the time zone, oh, it is the 5th of March, which you can't do it because so we had 1,001 patients. Retention was really good, but we learned so much about the difference from that trial that we moved forward. So that's an observational trial. We followed these people, we learned the differences, saw what correlated with their repeat size. Okay, that answered observational trial. Interventional trial, I think that comes next, okay? An interventional trial is where we try something to see if it works, okay? What do we do first usually? We see if one of the different things about HD than ALS and Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease is we theoretically, we're still learning, we have good animal models of HD. Okay, we can put a gene in a mouse, a fruit fly, a zebrafish, a goat, a monkey, a pig. Pigs are really good for this. And we usually try to see if it's safe and effective. So we've done different things from drugs to gene therapy and advanced therapy. This is a simple classic experiment though. Can something like a supplement be beneficial? So we had 2 trials looking at things which in the mouse model showed benefit. Some of you in the room, maybe even one of your first trials, would have been creatine or CoQ10. In the mice, it looked like it showed benefit. HD progresses so slowly, you have to plan for usually really long trials before you see things. And we don't have a lot of biomarkers. We have a lot now because everybody's participated in things and has given blood for certain things. But neither of those 2 trials, they were both stopped for not showing efficacy. And even those benign agents, relatively benign, creatine, which a lot of muscle builders use to build muscle, and CoQ10, which is used for heart disease, actually showed possible worsening and side effects. We have to keep learning, and we learned a lot from that. So those are easy interventional trials. Okay, now I know I can talk for the whole hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever, that have to keep me in control. So but we are now moving forward to different kinds of trials, which are what we're calling advanced stage trials. We have learned a lot from our studies. Martha alluded to, future possibilities of CRISPR and the MSH3. We're not quite there, but we're doing gene therapy trials. We're doing RNA trials. And these are, again, we're moving forward, but these are more risky. You participated in what didn't sound like a really highly risk abnormal study, but you had side effects, which is, again, the reason I think she's incredible, and all of you are for being brave. All right, I'll stop now. Okay. I can go further.
So maybe the other end of our table, maybe you can talk a little bit about either other ways, maybe, either if you're not comfortable in a research trial, maybe you don't qualify for it, or maybe just, because of your own interest, other ways you can get involved in clinical research.
Yeah, so great overview. I appreciate that. I think one of the big things when you think about research, right, and this is from my own experience, I always thought you had to participate in a study involving an investigational medicine, but there are other ways to get involved, such as an observational study. I've participated in Enroll HD for, I don't know, 8-9 years now, right? It's a once a year visit. And you kind of start to prepare for them. You try to figure out, okay, I got to remember these things called this test where you memorize the things that begin with the letter S or the letter A, or the red, green, blue tests, and then it turns in, at least for me, I try to make it a little bit of fun out of it. But there's other ways to get involved. There's surveys. So I know I've seen in the past patient advocacy groups such as HSA and HDO push out surveys where you can participate that way. HSG has what's called My HD Story, right, where they're collecting feedback from the community, and that also helps with research. Even sharing your story with one of the companies out there, I think that helps with research because they, and I work at one of those companies, but, people need to hear from the patients and caregivers. They need to hear the stories. They need to hear the unmet needs. They need to understand what are the challenges. And so even just sharing your story with someone else, I think that's doing research is going to help make a difference. I've participated in exercise studies. I've participated in those spinal taps or like lumbar punctures, which again, I think can sound intimidating, but when you kind of debunk some of it, and understand it's not as bad as it is, but also understand there are risks to it, right? But we take risks every single day. Even just getting on an airplane, there's a risk. driving your car, there's a risk, right? But you have to understand what's your risk tolerance to participate in different types of studies. And, as mentioned, there's a variety of different types. There's, potentially an oral pill. There's brain surgery. There's spinal taps. There might be IVs, but it's asking yourself, what are you willing to, potentially risk to participate? I mean, thinking of Susan, right? She could have just said, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't fun. But, having your support system there, I think makes a difference. Making sure that you are providing feedback during these experiences is important. So I think it's also time for us to continue to get more involved in research, get our voices heard as community members to say, what can we do more to really accelerate research? I say this as, when I first learned about HD, and maybe some of you here can resonate, you hear there's a treatment right around the corner. Well, that was, close to 20 years ago for me now. So to me, I'm kind of like, well, what can we do more as community members to push that forward, to accelerate research, to have that sense of urgency of saying, like, yes, I can wait for someone else, or how can I be a team player or a collaborator in pushing research forward by participating in these different studies or participating in surveys. So I don't know if I really actually answered the question at all, but it's just, I think the big thing is research is important, and in order to move things forward, it takes a village. It takes all of us here to get involved, but also don't be afraid to ask others, whether it's someone up here about our experiences or someone else in the community, and have that, like, maybe your research buddy, have your accountability buddy that can help you along the way.
Yeah, and I think it's important that, right, you can be involved in studies, but there's other ways to get involved too. You can work for a company that does studies or that it's interested in doing studies, family members, social workers. So maybe EJ and Mega, maybe you can talk a little bit about other ways to get involved, whether it's research or just in the community or in healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you're mentioning the CoQ10 study, and I remember my dad doing that with Dr. Ravia. Like, oh my gosh, he was taking all these supplements, and then they stopped. And just that experience as a family member to see the ups and downs of research. I will say my experience being at conference, being in the community, we never have a hard time finding people that want to do research, right? They're doing it for themselves, they're doing it for their children, for their family, they're fighting, right? So I feel like the encouragement for research, like, that's a given for us, right? But I think that there's another side of this, is that so much is taken away in HD, right? And it does give us a little bit of control, right? It gives us some control. This is something that we can do. One of the things that I think I've focused on is, because I'm not positive for the gene, is that it's service. And so volunteering, becoming in the, a social worker in the Center of Excellence at UC is the way that I give back. But part of that is there's so many great people out here doing this. There's a lot of opportunities. And so sometimes it's like, where is the best route for me to give and to support? And so we just do it every place that we can, I think.
Well, my line has always been, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physician, I'm not a clinician, but I am a volunteer. So how I can get involved, and how I encourage many of you, is just getting involved with your local chapters, your support groups, anyone that is involved in the Huntington space. One of the things that, for my son, one of the trials that he did was very early on, and he did the blueberry test. Does everybody remember that? And the CoQ10. So he loved that one because he could eat all the blueberries. He wanted to until he turned blue. But, he enjoyed doing that, and it was that empowerment that he had, that he could do something. The other trial that he was in was he had to go into an MRI machine. Well, if you have severe chorea, or even any chorea, he couldn't sit still to go through the machine. So he was very, very disappointed. So to have other things, the CoQ10 and the blueberry one was more up his alley, and he was able to participate. So whatever your situation is, just go for it and try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you've got that power that you are able to do something.
And if I can just add, I think, at every level, every person's story, every person's input is important for research. Being on the side now of clinical trial designs, we have questions like, well, why aren't older people included? Or why am I excluded from this study? Or why am I excluded from that study? And it's really important, whether it's my HD story or somebody asking questions or telling us stories, it's important for us to have that feedback. Because, as clinicians and researchers, we have we need to, the first thing is we got to see if it works. We have to get it, show positive results before we can do anything else. But these stories and these questions have really changed the way a lot of research and trials have been done. So we're opening it up to more patients. Once you're on the study, if the medication works, a lot of times, companies will allow you to continue on that medication. Or we do, there's what we call expanded access programs. So maybe the drug isn't approved yet, but now we're opening it up to more people who maybe didn't fit the criteria for the study. But we want, people to be able to have access to that because it's important for you and it's important for us too, right? We need that information. It's great if we know that, this medication works in people from 12 years old to 14 years old or 20 to 40 years old, if the wind is blowing east on Tuesday, right? We have these very strict criteria, but we need to know that it's going to work in a broader population. So please, get involved as much as you can. Give us your stories, give us your complaints. It's really important for us to know those things as well.
Can I jump in? Listening to something that EJ said made me think about another experience we don't usually think about, this fact that all these studies have clinical trials. And so first you hear what's sort of bad news, do you have HD or not? And we say, yes, you have HD. And then there's one of our trials, one of the gene therapies trials that's been going on, which has people early stage disease, people are excited, we're excited to do it, and all the sites have had an incredible screen fail rate. So telling people you don't meet the criteria is actually is something you have to be prepared for. If you do, I'm trying to push everybody doing every clinical trial, but it's not always easy. But I have to admit that people who failed for that trial, and like you, who you did a trial and then looking next forward, most of those for that particular cohort that I did are actually in another trial that came up next that they met the criteria for. And I don't want people to get upset or not stop just because they didn't meet the criteria for one study. And that's not something we talk about. There are other things coming forward, and you need to do that. Before I hit my next topic, I'm going to let someone else talk.
So one other thing, I also have twin granddaughters who are at risk, and they're now 19. But when they were maybe 6 or 7, of course, parents decided not to have them tested because too young, and it'll be their decision whether they get tested or not. But they were able to be part of a blind test somewhere in Iowa. I can't remember the name, something with just kids involved. Something like that, anyway. So they would go to Iowa, and they just thought it was a vacation. They got to go, and they got to meet other people, and they played with toys and games and all this other stuff. But they did not, no one ever said, you have HD or you don't have HD. But they were participating as a family. And so I don't know if there's a trial out there now, but if there is something out there and your family doesn't want to know that they have HD or not at this point in their life, maybe that could be a trial that they could participate in.
Yes. Yes. So
on exactly that point, the study that's been going on in Iowa for years has morphed into a bigger thing that's called Change HD, that is at 4 different sites around the country where anybody age 6 to 30, whether you've had a gene test or are diagnosed or not, or haven't had anything, you can participate in Change HD and basically go to one of these 4 sites. 7? So Sasha. Yeah, so come on. So tell them about Change HD. What the heck?
So Change HD is a 7-site study studying kiddos at risk either through a grandparent or a parent, ages 6 to 30. It's a phenomenal study. The main site is in Iowa. Kids love getting involved. They feel like they're really, contributing to the field and moving it forward, which they are. A lot of the studies that they're doing during the day are fun. They're interactive. They're like video games. So it's a great place for kids to get involved. And it's really wonderful for us to meet all these families, right? And we have cousins that come in from various places and they come and hang out together. Sometimes we have 5 siblings in doing the study together. So it's a lot of fun. It's once a year.
And then the sites are?
Oh, there's 7 of us. So just go on the Change website and they'll show you kind of where we all are. So scattered throughout the United States.
Sorry to interrupt here.
Just one other thing just to mention is, because I've talked with just several people even earlier today, saying, I have a family member who's at risk, right? Or you might be at risk, and you can still participate in Enroll HD or potentially, I believe, Change HD, being at risk, not knowing your gene status, and that's okay. They're not going to suddenly tell you, hey, by the way, I think I noticed something or something's there. That's not their goal. Their goal is to help you with the study. And these are observational studies, so again, doesn't involve any type of medicine. So, even if you're thinking about it and you're like, hey, I'm not ready to test because it is a very personal decision, but maybe I want to get involved, you can take a survey or you can participate and enroll, which really helps advance research forward. So I just wanted to also add that because I know some people might be hesitant and say, well, will I know still? And it's like, no, you just participate and, call it a day.
So we have about 5 minutes left. So we wanted to make sure we left time for questions. So are there any questions from anybody?
Anti-chorea medication, valbenazine, does not work for me. It has the absolute opposite effect. It makes me very sick. It makes me very disorganized. So there is no good chorea medication out at this point, according to my neurologist, for me. And I'm trying to think of it. Oh, and this is the connection between sleep disorders and Huntington's disease. I was just recently diagnosed with sleep apnea, but I think that sleep issues are very common, and it would be nice to see some sort of study if there isn't already one.
Yep.
Okay, that's it.
So I'll make one comment. Right, there are treatments that are available to help treat chorea, but obviously they don't necessarily work for everyone, or they may work, but then they have intolerable side effects. So there is continued research and looking at different compounds. There was actually a good presentation yesterday talking about a new medication that's being tested. It's actually an old medication that's being tested to help treat things, to treat symptoms. So we're continuing, we've talked a lot about trying to slow the progression of the disease and starting really early, but we still have to think about, people that are experiencing symptoms now. So absolutely, there's continued research and trying to find different classes. So maybe if you don't tolerate this class, then maybe you'll be able to tolerate that class. And I think, as a testament to a lot of the research that's coming up is, it's, again, important to get patient and family input because sometimes the things that we really get focused on are not necessarily the things that are important to you. And so a lot of research now is focused on what we call PROs, or patient-reported outcomes. So people talking about the things that really bother them the most or that are most disabling to them. It may not be chorea, right? It may be difficulty sleeping. It may be mood or cognitive issues, things that, that we don't always necessarily focus on. So I think it's really important to continue those things, but there definitely are studies that are addressing a lot of these. I don't know if anybody else wants to.
A quick comment about that. I know it's frustrating, and all of us in the movement disorder group have patients who've not responded to any of the chorea medicines. We are still trying, but one of the places where answers for that may come, and here's my hard push on the Enroll HD study. HD is a rare disorder, and getting data for it is really hard. Enroll by following all these patients, aside from looking at things. Over the years, we're looking at there are other changes on other chromosomes that affect presentation. There's one in particular that makes the disorder look more dystonic, which means fixed movements, or even more Parkinsonian, perhaps, and you may have one of those variants. I would like to come up and see why, because each of us, is there some genetic subtlety on the people who are not responding to VMAT2 inhibitors? Can we look and find for that particular subgroup of patients? We now have 20,000 patients and blood samples to explore and advances, and this is because everybody's participating, so it's important.
I just want to say, too, that I was at this conference the last 2 days here, and I know they're going to talk about hope at the last segment today, but I feel so hopeful because everything was over my head. But the number of people who are on our team to help eradicate HD, find a cure, treat symptoms, everybody is working so hard to help us. So I just want people to have that hope because I totally have it.
Question. We can take another question. Is there?
Here, question lady. All right. My husband and I adopted a baby from Guatemala who is now 22 years old. And I think, well, he's got his own addiction issues. I'm trying to just deal with his terror over my disease, and we've had other losses in the family. And I'm mentioning and just bringing it up as an issue. You know, it's somebody who is a parent. I'm 73, and I'm very lucky to have a great husband. I think our son is terrified of this disease.
I think that is, I don't want to cut you off, but I think that's such a common issue. I mean, we all are experiencing the anxiety and the fear from this disease. And I think, from the mental health side of things, I really am always advocating for counseling, support groups. There is such an incredible, I know in Cincinnati, in our area, but in all over the country, all over the world, there's such incredible supports for all these kids dealing with parents that are developing symptoms of HD at risk. Who's going to test, right? There's all of these fantastic support groups for every little niche that we might fall into. And so I would encourage, as you see your family, your loved ones, your significant others, experiencing that kind of worry, right? That we have a place for them. There's a community waiting to support them. So I think it's not an uncommon experience to have this uncertainty create that fear. It is very scary, but they're not alone. So
We can take.
Yeah. So as someone who was once a young person in this world, I'm still a young person, EUJ, thank you. She said it, not me. So there's a couple different, organizations out there that do some great work supporting young people impacted by HD. Some, when I first got involved, there's the National Youth Alliance that's part of HCSA. Definitely check out the HCSA table or go find Marianne. Or Marianne, put your hand up, please. Sorry to embarrass you. Thank you. I would say, that's a great place to go to, get support as a young person. There's also HDO. It's an international nonprofit. They also have a table out there. Highly recommend checking those out because, when I was a young person, or I still am, yes, but when I first learned about it, I didn't know where to turn. The first other person around my age I met, because this person who lived down the hall from me in college was like, oh, my friend's coming and her mom has HD. And I was like, whoa, there's other people outside of like my own family bubble that has HD. And when I got to connect with them, I felt like I wasn't being judged. I wasn't isolated, and there was someone around my age who just understood what I was going through. And I think that's something that's important for young people, to have that support, that peer-to-peer support, and having those resources. There's a lot of great resources actually on the HDO website for different age groups. And so, I definitely recommend checking them out, and then, again, checking out what Marianne's doing at HCSA as well. But one last kind of final thought I'll say, just as someone who's kind of in that pre-symptomatic stage, I think I am hopeful, right? There's a lot of amazing research. There's a lot of great things happening. But I would also say, I at times feel like I'm racing against this invisible clock. And I need to continue to advocate. And I think everyone on the stage is advocating that's why it's important to participate in research, so that we can hopefully one day treat earlier and find ways to slow this disease down or halt it, or find ways to just improve quality of life. So, really encourage all of you just to try to get more involved if you can. Get involved in research, or get involved with your local chapter, or just kind of the HD community in general.
And I'd just like to highlight too, right, for HDO, that you mentioned for people is it, I don't know what the age range generally is, but is it they're up to 30?
35 and under.
Okay,
So
so 35
I'm
and
still,
under.
I still make the cut.
I do not. But it's for people who are impacted by HD. So whether or not you're at risk, or even if you're not gene positive, it's still for people. If you have, if you're adopted, so that you're not necessarily at any higher risk. It's for anybody that's impacted by it, and again, very sort of age specific groups, so you can interact with people that are your age and that are understand the same questions that you have. The questions you have at 15 might be different than the questions, hopefully, are different than the questions you have at 20 or 25. So,
Does anybody else have a question? We do have time for one more question.
I'm from Massachusetts, and so that my question or the answer may vary by state, but I would be interested in hearing from maybe other people, or you guys, or the social worker, about insurance coverage.
Oh boy, we might need like a whole. It is very different by state. And, we can talk health insurance, short-term, long-term disability, life insurance, Social Security disability, state and disability programs. There's so many different, variables that really come into play, and what a family, the whole family, having a neurological condition in the family, how that impacts different levels of insurance, and how there are protections in place that it does not have the ability to impact insurability. We have this talk a lot with people, especially our very smart genetic counselor that comes to us from Children's Hospital that is with us in our clinic is a great resource as well. But I would encourage anyone that has insurance questions, whether that's healthcare, insurability for, like life insurance, long-term disability, which is kind of like a, a dream now, like if anyone could get long-term disability, right? But I would encourage you to reach out to some of the organizations that are here that have tables up. I'm happy to talk out. I may not be an expert in your state, but there are resources available. There are insurance, folks that can help you pick a plan knowing that you have HD. So there's a lot of resources out there. So I think.
So it is state-specific, as you point out. So often the social worker is a good person to contact. But the other support, which we found is, I'm the co-chair of the EMC of the Huntington Study Group, where we're at now. But we also work very closely with the HDSA. And they actually have a lawyer who works with them, who has been helping some of our people who've been refused disability. And you can contact them. And they have a program for also doing online psychiatric support for people who have worries related, for even someone who may be worried about being a future caregiver for HD.
The person at HDSA can be found on hdsa.org. Her name is Allison Bartlett, and we can talk afterwards, and I can give you her contact information. But for anyone who has any questions about that issue, it's on the HDSA website.
Great. Thank you. Please give all of our speakers here a huge round of applause. Very, very important session.